Hello, this is Artemis_anime, and this is the third chapter of Viridian by SilvermistAnimeLover. Please excuse the birds in the background. Izuku sighed as he casually strolled through the back alleyways leading to Dogma. He had already gotten into a few smaller fistfights with the local homeless thugs who'd been trying to sleep on his beach. He'd been homeless enough times in the first run, how he'd started referring to his original timeline, that he understood the importance of protecting your territory. If he just let any old homeless beggar sleep on his beach, then he'd find himself dead fairly quickly. Or they'd take his stuff, which could lead him to death. Either way, there wasn't much trust among the homeless. He couldn't afford to be nice, especially when any literal injury had a fairly high risk of getting infected and putting him out of commission. That was something he could not afford. He had to get into UA. No ands, ifs, or buts. His unwanted neighbors, those who slept in the alleyways and parks surrounding the beach, were learning fairly quickly not to mess with the seemingly defenseless child. And, after last week's incident, where he coolly stared down a beggar with a gun, well, let's just say he was not only earning their respect, but their fear too. He didn't mind, so long as they left him alone. He was now officially out of money, though. He'd made it last as long as he could, but it wasn't like he had any income. He had gotten lucky with those chocolate coins in the treasure chest gig he'd pulled, but what else was he supposed to do after winning a year's supply of chocolate coins? He sure as hell couldn't eat all that. Besides, the recording of Namsa losing his shit was priceless and still made him chuckle. One day, he and the detective would look back at that video and laugh. Probably. But his most pressing issue now was food. He was able to shower at the local gym, the locks were dreadfully easy to pick, and he'd had 5-finger discounted all the hygiene items he needed. He did the same with the light snacks and the like, but he felt bad for stealing like that. Water was easy enough to come by. The parks had plenty of water fountains that he could rehydrate at. Plus, after the dented hydro flask he'd found in the dump was perfect after he'd bleached it out. Seriously, the previous owner had somehow grown mold and decided to toss it out thereafter. It just needed a good soak in bleach and hot water. People were so lazy these days. Oh well, more for him. But he couldn't keep stealing loaves of bread like some discount Aladdin. He needed to find a way to actually buy food. Actual groceries and stuff. He couldn't survive off bread and jerky forever, especially since he was still recovering from his near starvation and the apocalypse, and all his vigilante activities. He couldn't get a job, though. He had to be at least 15 to work at any real establishment. And even then, he would have to get his school's permission. No way Aldera would grant him that. Never mind the fact that he was quirkless, he'd probably have to pay them to hire him. So, getting a job was out. He'd briefly considered Psyche, but quickly shuddered. No, hell no. He'd worked under the guy once, and he swore he'd never make the same mistake again. So, where did that leave him? Food from the shelters? No, too many questions. Homeless adults were one thing, but a homeless kid with no parental supervision, he'd get CPS called on his ass faster than he could outrun Tsukuchi. And Izuku did not want to get chucked into the system, or to be sent back to his mother. Besides, the food banks required you to register yourself, which included quirks. Something that would instantly disqualify him, as he'd learned from experience. Fucking quirkless discrimination. Welp, what do you think, Sho? He turned to look at an old photo he'd found at the bottom of his bag. It'd been taken within the first few years of the apocalypse. Shota stood, a hand on Izuku's shoulder, and Hizashi had an arm flung around both of them. Nemuri stood on Izuku's other side, ruffling his hair. Power Litter stood in the background, smiling fondly beside Dabi and Tamaki. Good time. He missed his family. Tears pricked the edges of his eyes. He looked away. I know. I'm being stupid. He chuckled humorously to himself. I don't know, guys. Maybe it's the hunger talking? At any rate, I'm open to suggestions. Silence. He'd scuffed his foot against the carpet of the camper. It was too quiet. He couldn't take it any longer. Abruptly, he stood. Okay. He clapped his hands. Since the food issue is too much for me right now, let's just, do something else. He glanced out the window where the late afternoon sun shone through. It's too early for patrol, he pouted. But he reached over and pulled out the laptop he'd salvaged from the dump. Well, salvage was a bit of a stretch, considering the fact that he'd practically built the damn thing from scratch. He booted it up. He grinned as he played some music. Let's get to hacking, then. Viridian had just finished tying up some unsavory thugs. One man glared at him, and he chuckled. This guy's glare had nothing on Shigaraki. He'd never really been concerned about villains seeing him, or heroes, or cops for that matter. It was more of a game, really. He wanted to see how long he could go before they sighted him. So far it had been 4 months, and no hero or cop had actually laid eyes on him.
So you're that fucking Viridian guy?
Yup, he smirked.
You're shitting me. You're Japan's most elusive vigilante?
Another guy scoffed. Oh, so I'm the most elusive now? I got an upgrade. He grinned, waiting for the telltale silence of sirens in the distance. He paused, sensing something else. Quick as a shadow and quiet as snow, he ducked out of the sights of the villains as he scaled the side of an alleyway before perching atop the roof. Not a moment later, a very familiar figure entered the alleyway. Shota. He blinked back tears, ducking behind the ledge as to not be seen. Viridian ducked behind the edge of an alleyway just as the man rounded the corner. He had a strange yellow scarf wrapped around his neck that seemed to hide something yellow, and was dressed in black. The messy, unkempt hair and the perpetually exhausted look led him to believe that this was the hero, Eraserhead. Famous among vigilantes, the man was rumored to be sharp and quick, and he had to get out of there before he... Who's there? Eraserhead demanded as he immediately ran towards Viridian's hiding spot. Shit. Viridian quickly climbed the fire escape just as the man found him. He found something wrap around his left ankle and yanked him down to street level. Aw, come on, that's cheating! I thought you had a normal scarf, Viridian complained. He didn't care that it made him look childish. He'd had a very long time. Before that, he had much time to complain. The man wrapped tightly and securely in the binding. Who are you? Viridian. So you're that vigilante, huh? You're shorter than I expected. Well, excuse me for growing up neglected and half-starved. Not my fault my growth was stunted. I'm going to have to take you back to the station. For what? I haven't broken any laws, Viridian huffed. He tried to cross his arm, but the scarf was too tight, so he settled for pouting. Look, nice try, kid, but I'm an adult, I'll have you know. You're a kid to me, Eraserhead glared. Vigilism is a crime. I'm placing you under arrest. You have no proof that I used a quirk. Vigilism is defined as a person who uses their quirk illegally to take down a crime. I've got a friend who can help me with that. He yanked on the scarf, making Viridian stumble after him. Now come on, you're wasting my time. I want to sleep tonight, thanks. Viridian was glad, not for the first time, that he was a paranoid bastard. He waited until Eraserhead turned away to lead him from the alleyway, before he grinned. He slipped off the caps he kept on his canines, revealing very sharp fangs. Years ago, he'd asked a good friend who had had a transmutation quirk and happened to be a dentist to file down his teeth into fangs, just the canines, and reinforce them with the strongest metal he could. The guy happened to owe Izuku a favor, and did so without raising much of a fuss, though he did charge him a small fortune. Now, Viridian was very grateful for this decision, as he silently tore through the bindings with said fangs. Eraserhead looked behind him just in time to see Viridian disappear over the rooftop. He cursed. Viridian shook himself out of his flashback, tongue absently running over the exposed fangs. He had figured he should keep them out as Viridian and hide them as Izuku. He hadn't realized how hard this would be. He'd wanted nothing more than to jump down into the alleyway and hug him, but he doesn't know you. You're nothing but a vigilante to him. He's not Shota. He's Eraserhead. They aren't the same person now. He took a deep breath. Luckily, he had a few weeks of experience with memory, so this was a lot easier than it would have been without. He shook his head and looked back over the edge, watching as Eraserhead scoured the area for him. Viridian barely dodged out of sight as Eraserhead looked up, and he heard the capture weapon wrapping around the nearby fire escape. Well, Viridian had no intention of replicating how they met in the original timeline. He wasted no time in making his own escape. He leapt over the roofs with as much of grace as practice as the man behind him. Eraserhead was fast, but Viridian had plenty of practice running across rooftops while trying to outrun dangerous and hungry monsters. Compared to that, this was a leisurely jog. He locked eyes with Eraserhead over his shoulder as he finally shook him off his trail. That made Eraserhead the first person to actually see him. Namsa was going to flip his shit, but first, he smirked, knowing that Eraserhead would still be looking for him. Now that he'd had a breather to calm him down and really process his situation, he found himself giddy. He knew how to get under Aizawa Shota's skin like nobody else, and he was going to have fun this go-around. Okay, so maybe he was a little bitter at how the man had captured him in the original timeline.
Viridian Chaos. Hello, Eraserhead. Nice night we're having. Watson, how the hell did you get this number? Viridian Chaos. I have my ways. Watson changed their name to Eraserhead. Viridian Chaos added Detective Holmes to the chat. Detective Holmes. Viridian, what are you up to now? Eraserhead. You mean he does this a lot? Detective Holmes. More than you know. Viridian Chaos. I thought you'd be happy to know that Eraserhead here is the first person to officially see me. Detective Holmes. You're shitting me. You really saw him? Eraserhead. Yeah, he's shorter than I expected. Viridian Chaos. Hey, that's mean. I'll have you know that my growth was stunted due to a neglectful childhood and malnutrition. Detective Holmes. Are you giving us a name? Viridian Chaos. Viridian. Eraserhead. Perhaps something more to go on, like age or birthday? Viridian Chaos. How about no? Look, I'm a vigilante, not stupid. I text you guys to mess with you, because I'm bored. There's no villains that night, so I'm talking with you instead. Viridian Chaos. Eraserhead, I hear you sigh from over here. I left you some coffee for your rooftop stair. The bag's under your eyes, tell me you need it.
He watched with a low chuckle as the hero immediately headed to said location, only to find a bag of his favorite coffee grounds from his favorite cafe. The hero's head whipped around, startled. He growled when he couldn't find the vigilante.
Eraserhead, how the hell did you know my favorite coffee? Detective Holmes. He has his ways. He knows everyone's favorite coffee, snack, sandwich, and donut. I have no idea how he does it, but he does. Eraserhead, I'm gonna lose a lot of sleep over you, aren't I? Viridian Chaos. Yep. Smiley face.
Izuku chuckled as he checked the group chat that he'd created. It had himself, Namsa, and Eraserhead. They'd probably add Present Mike eventually, probably midnight. The UA entrance exams were steadily creeping up, and Izuku had reluctantly kept adding Algebra Junior High. He could just hack the system and leave UA none the wiser, but he'd heard stories of Nizu's intelligence, and that was one basket of hornets he did not want to poke. It was easier for him to simply stay in school, patrol at night, and sleep in his refurbished camper whenever he had the chance. It wasn't like schoolwork was hard either. But Bakugo was a fucking pain in his ass. It wasn't that the brat was strong or intimidating to him anymore, but Izuku had once physically defended himself against Bakugo, only for Izuku to nearly get suspended for defending himself. He couldn't risk a mark on his record. He had to get into UA, no matter what. So, as much as he hated it, he had to suck it up and take Bakugo's shit. Though he tossed his own verbal remarks back at the little brat, causing the blonde to blink in angered shock every time, which was rather entertaining, especially when Izuku tossed in profanities, when teachers couldn't hear him, of course. It actually made things somewhat interesting for him, as he had to find new creative ways to outmaneuver Bakugo, so he didn't get beat up after school. Besides, Izuku wasn't known for his fighting skills. That was just another thing to separate Izuku from Viridian. By the 6-month mark, Viridian had been listed as one of the most wanted vigilantes in all of Japan. Not because he was that dangerous, he was, but they didn't need to know that, but because he was just that difficult to catch. And even after 6 months, the only people who he'd let see him were Eraserhead and Namsa. There were once or twice where he'd let his silhouette be spotted on a rooftop, but Namsa and Eraserhead were the only two he'd ever let actually fully see him in person, aside from the people he'd rescued and villains. He'd also done some work in a few other towns too, deciding to branch out and to search for other signs of the League of the Villains. Even in Tokyo, which had some of Japan's most prevalent and talented heroes, nobody had really gotten a good look at him, let alone gotten close enough to catch him. But now he was back in Mufasu. He grinned at the thought of Tsukichi and Eraserhead. They still had no idea that the guy they were chasing was a now 15-year-old middle schooler who didn't even have a quirk. He still left puzzles and riddles and other games for his favorite detective and hero to solve whenever he had the chance. It ticked them both off, but he could tell he was growing on that. Aizawa Shota wasn't sure what to make of the newest vigilante, Viridian. The man was more elusive than Smoke, and more annoying than Hizashi, something that he wasn't sure was possible until he met Viridian. Somehow, though, the man was growing on him, like a fungus, an unwanted, irritating, disgusting fungus. Even after all these months, they were going on 6 months now, since Viridian had started his vigilante career, they knew next to nothing about this man. It was incredibly frustrating. They'd had a nice break these last few weeks, where Viridian had mostly been bothering heroes and police in other cities, mostly Tokyo and Koto. The man was infuriatingly good at slipping away. Not a single hero had gotten close enough to even see him, let alone capture him. That meant that he and Tsukichi were still the only people who'd had the honor of seeing the man in the flesh. He scowled at his phone in his pocket when it quietly vibrated, letting him know that the very irritation he'd been thinking of was also thinking of him. Wonderful.
Viridian Chaos. Alright, Sarah, what's up? Eraserhead. Viridian Chaos. You're no fun. Detective Holmes. Any reason you two decided to distract me from my paperwork like this? Eraserhead. You could have just silenced the chat. Detective Holmes. ... Viridian Chaos. Oh, this is rich. You don't know how? You're such an old man. Winky face.
Shota had to admit, the fact that the detective didn't know how to silence the chat was kind of funny, even though he'd never tell Viridian that. Ever.
Eraserhead. Was there a reason you contacted me? Viridian Chaos. Oh yeah, I wanted to let you know. I'm back in town. Eraserhead. Damn. Here I thought I'd have a longer vacation. Viridian Chaos. You know you love me. Eraserhead. Love? I think you misspelled loathe. Viridian Chaos. Don't be a crouch, you tsundere. By the way, you've got the drug bust tonight, right? Detective Holmes. I don't know why I even question how you know so much anymore. Yes, Eraserhead and I have a drug bust tonight. Why? Viridian Chaos. Don't go. It's a setup. They know you're coming. You'll get hurt.
Eraserhead stared at the phone for a full minute. This was not what he was expecting.
Eraserhead. Do you have any evidence to back up your claim? Viridian Chaos. Nothing physical. I overheard a few things. Now I'm seriously worried about you guys. Detective Holmes. That's cute, but we've got jobs to do. Viridian Chaos. No, sir. Don't go. You too, Shota.
Eraserhead stiffened at his given name. How the hell had that guy gotten his civilian name?
Eraserhead. I did not give you permission to call me by my name. Viridian Chaos. Sorry. Aizawa. Is that better? Eraserhead. No. Viridian Chaos. Too bad. Either way, don't go. Eraserhead. Sorry? Well, we've got a drug ring to bust. Viridian Chaos. Eraserhead. Viridian Chaos. Aizawa. Viridian Chaos. Shota, damn it. So, you better make it out of there alive. You two know, Seth.
Shota was to admit that he was a bit bothered by the way this man was using their given names so freely. But he didn't have much time to worry. They both needed to be at the top of their game for the bust tonight. 20 minutes into said bust, he was cursing himself for not listening to Viridian. Here he was, Tsukichi at his side, held at gunpoint and quirk point by 20 armed men. He'd been right. It was a trap. A trap set up to capture a hero and take out as many cops as they could. Nearly all the men Tsukichi had brought with him were dead or too injured to do anything. Shota's capture weapon was confiscated, as were his knives and the detective's gun. They were defenseless, and Shota was cursing himself internally. He didn't see how this situation could get much worse.
An interesting little catch we've made.
The man grinned as he looked at the hero-detective duo that was tied up to a nearby support pillar in the warehouse. The man turned to some of his men, barking at them to watch their prisoners before gathering the drugs they'd originally come to take. Shota glared at the man, but didn't activate his quirk. Erasing the man's quirk wouldn't help him or Tsukuchi get out of their little world bind. If anything, they'd just blindfold him, and then he'd be completely useless. Any ideas on how to get us out of this, Eraser? Tsukuchi whispered through their bloodied teeth. Shota grimaced at the taste of blood in his own mouth. Nothing yet. He bit back a groan at his screaming ribs. He'd taken a rather nasty blow to his torso earlier, and that sent him flying into the detective. They were both injured rather nicely, with nothing to show for their pain. He saw something moving quickly through the shadows, but he brushed it off as a trick of the light, or possibly a concussion. He eyed the table that held their weapons on the far side of the room. If only we could get our stuff. Shota blinked, once, twice. No, he was sure his capture weapon had been there a moment ago. But suddenly, the familiar fabric was missing from the table. His eyes darkened around the room as he tried to find who may have taken it. Tsukuchi nudged him gently and discreetly gestured for Shota to look up. There in the rafters was a small dark figure. They were crouched, and Shota easily recognized the scarf-like outline of his capture weapon. He prayed this was another hero that had come to back them up. Before he could do much else, the figure dashed almost too quickly to follow. They threw out his capture weapon with ease and grace that took Shota years to achieve. What the? Nobody could use his capture weapon like him. He'd made sure of it when he'd asked the support course to design it while he was still a teenager. But here this stranger was, using it like they'd been training with it for decades. Who the hell are you? One by one, the grunts were quietly hoisted up into the rafters and silenced without drawing attention. It was masterfully done, and Shota found himself admiring their technique. Hey, Garu, where's the... One of the men stopped and looked around. Hey, where'd everybody... He was quickly cut off as the figure threw down a smoke bomb, alerting the rest of the room to their presence. Then they jumped down from the rafters and vanished into a thick haze. Sit still and stay calm, he heard the voice whisper from behind him. Viridian, what are you doing here? Tsukuchi whispered back. Shota jolted. This was Viridian, the most elusive vigilante in Japan, was right behind him, and he couldn't do anything else. Saving your asses, what does it look like? I told you not to come. Shota felt the bindings around his hand fall away, and the familiar fabric of his capture weapon graze his hand. Judging from the look on the detective's face, the man must have also freed Tsukuchi and returned his weapon. You're one crazy vigilante, you know. Most of you guys would have celebrated this situation. Tsukuchi hummed as he flicked the safety off his gum. You don't hear me complaining, Shota huffed, readying himself for the attack. But how the hell did Viridian learn to use my capture weapon? Shota wondered to himself. I'm not like most vigilantes. Yeah, we've noticed. Tsukuchi smirked as the three of them ran into the dissipating smoke. Shota was used to fighting with low visibility, and it seemed that Viridian was too. The two of them managed to take out the remaining men as the smoke completely vanished. The vigilante, detective, and hero all shared an uneasy, awkward look. I suppose we owe you a thanks. Tsukuchi had a sour look on his face as he said it. Shota realized this was the first time they'd really gotten a proper look at the vigilante. He was a lot shorter than Shota thought he'd be. He was decked out in what looked like a ninja costume, complete with a short sword strapped onto his back, and it had an emerald green eyes that shone like gemstones. He opened his mouth to say something when the man's bright green eyes widened in fear. He shoved Shota roughly aside, just as there was a loud bang that echoed through the warehouse. Tsukuchi reacted quickly, firing off his own shot, killing the leader of the gang who'd shot at them. A wet cough made Shota's eyes widen as he realized what occurred. Hey, Viridian! He caught the probably older man as he staggered. He was bleeding heavily from his chest, where the bullet had gotten him. He took a bullet for me, Shota realized. That would have killed me. I'll be fine. No, we need to get you to a hospital. Tsukuchi quickly balled up some fabric and pressed it to the vigilante's wounds. Viridian chuckled. As much as I appreciate the concern, I have dealt with worse before. Besides, it's not as bad as it looks. Before Shota or Tsukuchi could do anything, Viridian roughly shoved them both away. I'll text you guys tomorrow so you both know I'm not dead. He winked before escaping out the window faster than either of them could give chase, leaving the two staring dumbfounded after him. They'd never admit just how grateful and relieved they were when Viridian texted them the next morning. Viridian laughed as he leapt across the rooftops like some old-school comic book hero. He'd been leading around his favorite hero and detective duo all night. Again. He'd been a little off his game when he'd started his vigilante work again 7 months ago, but now he was back in full string and ready to go. He'd been following any little whisper of the League of Villains. Maybe, if he could find Shigaraki, he could kill the bastard before ever taking the UA exams. Crisis would be averted and the USJ incident wouldn't even happen. Then they'd just need to worry about All for One. But that was really more of an All Might's major problem, anyhow. At the very least, All for One wasn't about to bring the end of humanity as they knew it. At the worst, he'd forcefully take over Japan as a dictator again. But even that would be better than what he'd already lived through. He smirked as he landed down in an alleyway. This was their reward for all the crap they'd gone through. He knew his little games were beyond annoying, but they entertained him. Besides, at least he was helping them rather than hurting them. His games were usually to protect them anyhow. Viridian was finally going to let Detective Tsukuchi have a face-to-face conversation with him. The warehouse didn't count, because that was more battle banter than an actual conversation. Well, it was also a thank you for worrying about him. After he'd been shot at a few weeks ago, he'd proceeded to return home, fix himself up, and pass out. And damn, they'd blown up their group chat while he'd been taking his little power nap. Izuku had been so touched when he'd awoken to 50 worried notifications that he'd replied to them quickly and let them know he was alive and well. Or as well as one can be when they were shot at before a major exam. Bakugo had been hell to avoid the next day. The two warily stepped into the alleyway. He'd been careful to stay under the radar for the last few weeks, mostly due to his recovering injury. Viridian's note had explicitly told them to show up alone. No other cops. He smirked as he stepped out of the shadows, a tray of coffee in his hand. Namsa, Aizawa, good to see you two again. He smiled, though they could only see his bright green eyes. The two gave barely noticeable sighs of relief. Glad to see you're alive. How's your injury? Tsukuchi asked. It's doing much better now, thanks for asking, Viridian grinned. Tsukuchi nodded to Eraserhead, acknowledging the truth of the statement. Why did you lead us here? Eraserhead asked. I was bored, and I thought after all the games I've put you through, I at least showed you a face-to-face conversation, he shrugged, leaning against the brick wall casually. Plus, I figured you were still worried about the whole gunshot thing. He handed over the coffee, to which the hero and the detective didn't even blink. The hero quickly started drinking his. You do realize that we have legal obligation to arrest you, right? Tsukuchi asked in disbelief. Yep, but not tonight. I'm simply here to talk for as long as you want me to. But the moment you make a move to arrest me, I'm gone. So if you got any burning questions, ask them now. He knew his green eyes were sparkling with amusement because Eraserhead scowled. Who are you? Eraserhead growled. I'm Viridian. Your real name? Something you'll have to figure out on your own. Good luck with that, though. How old are you? Tsukuchi asked. Somewhere between the ages of 6 and 50. Are you Japanese? Yes. They blinked at the straightforward answer. Born and raised. Why are you a vigilante? Tsukuchi asked again. Tough question, detective. He tapped on his chin for a moment before he thought. I suppose I've always wanted to be a hero. But I failed every hero school entrance exam I took as a young teenager. I tried to live a normal, boring life, but he looked off for a moment. I can't help but wanting to help people. I can't just not help them. So if I have to do so as a vigilante instead of a hero, at least I'm still helping other people. At least I'm still saving lives. He's telling the truth. Tsukuchi blinked incredulously. What, is that uncommon for vigilantes? Viridian tilted his head, confused. Most of the ones I've met just want to use their quirks in public. Tsukuchi shook his head. Well then, Mr. Lie Detector, let me let you in on a little secret. He chuckled again, a grin spreading across his face. I, Viridian, have never used a quirk during my vigilante activities. You're shitting me. Tell me he's lying, Eraserhead choked. He's telling the truth. Doesn't that mean... Eraserhead looked like he wanted to bash his head against the brick wall. We can still get you for assault, Tsukuchi glared. Section 24, subsection C, states that assault charges are only valid when the accused party struck first. I always let my enemies strike first. Even if said strike doesn't hit, You can ask any single one of the villains I've turned into you. Then, by law, I have done nothing illegal. Viridian laughed lowly. Besides, the laws don't even technically affect a quirkless person. Even child custody's laws don't matter. That's why Snogi-chan's son was put into the foster care system, even though she was alive, able, and had a stable income. After her husband died, she was invisible to the law, and her son was taken away. He clenched a fist in anger, making a mental note to keep her husband from dying in this go-around before taking a deep breath. You legally can't arrest me. I'm so fucking done. Eraserhead leaned against the brick wall next to him. Come now, Eraserhead, don't be like that. And here I've come with an opportunity for you both. The two men stiffened. Opportunity? Yes, now that we've established that while I'm a vigilante, sort of, I'm not technically doing anything illegal. I'd like to extend an offer of allegiance with you two. Namely, I know a lot of things that go around. I've got an extensive information network. I can provide you with information. Be your ears and eyes beyond the police and hero networks. I'll be your gray area. You realize that we can't actually do that, right? Tsukuchi didn't look impressed. Unless under excruciating circumstances, Viridian nodded. But fortunately for me, these are. He tossed the folder at Tsukuchi's feet. The man warily bent down to pick it up. His eyes went wide as he flipped through it. This case has been cold for weeks. I've been looking into it for you. I'm 98% sure that's where they're keeping the missing children. He locked eyes with the two. Look, I'm not asking for you to trust me. I'm not asking for you to like me. But the three of us have one thing in common. We all want to save lives. If I can help you do so, then why would you throw me away? He shoved his hands in his pockets. You know how to get a hold of me. Think about my offer and shoot me a text if you want my help on anything. I also just gave you my burner phone's number. If you feel like dropping me a call, though I usually don't answer those. Just a warning. He glanced at the two. And for your own peace of mind, Detective, I have no intentions of hurting you, your men, or any heroes. Eraserhead, I don't mean you, your students, if you have any this year, or your coworkers any harm. If anything, I just want to protect everyone I can. What do you want in return? Eraserhead's eyes narrowed. He hesitated for a moment. There's a man I'm after. His name is Shigaraki Tomura. If you find his information, please let me know. He's about as nasty as a villain as they come. I don't want him to kill anyone else. You know we can't. Fine. Eraserhead cut off Tsukuchi mid-sentence. Eraserhead, what do you mean, fine? If you really mean what you say, and you'll help us save people, then we'll keep our ears open for any tale of this Shigaraki Tomura person. Thank you. With that, Viridian vanished into the night. Tsukuchi Namsa smiled softly as he reunited the last missing child with their family. Viridian's information had been right on the money, and the vigilante himself had shown up and kept the kid safe until the police arrived. He was starting to think this offer might not be such a bad thing. Unfortunately, it wasn't a call he was allowed to make. You called? Silvermist stepped into his office, nose likely picking up on Viridian's unfamiliar scent. The dog-headed man kept a steady gaze on his subordinate. Yes, sir. It's about Viridian. Namsa sighed as he gestured for his boss to close the door behind him. It took an hour and a half to fully explain the situation, along with new information that the vigilante had never once used his quirk during his nightly activities. The police chief sat for a long time, thinking over the information that the detective had provided him with. This is quite the conundrum, he hummed. Should we work with him, sir? The information he provided me is what got those 36 children home safely. Well, it's not like trying to capture him has gotten anyone anywhere, he sighed as he scratched the back of his ear. All right. Any information he shares with you is shared with me. That is your condition, and I would like to meet him myself. Namasa smiled in relief. I'll arrange the meeting.
Moldy broccoli. Guys, Viridian's got a webpage now. I have no name. Yeah, I saw. Apparently he's gotten really popular. Nobody's really seen him aside from the people he's rescued or arrested. Dragon dress. There are some pics online now, though. Looks like a ninja. Noisy, cuddly. I actually found some Viridian merch at my local hero store today. Moldy broccoli. What? I must have it. Forsaken emo boy. Isn't he just a vigilante though? I mean, why would a vigilante have merch? Noisy, cuddly. I have no idea. Maybe someone must have come to our hero. Hold on, I'll send a pic. Noisily, heartily, Viridian marching dog GBDG. Moldy broccoli. Wow, it's his vigilante outfit. Forsaken emoji. How do you know that? It looks like a Halloween costume to me. Moldy broccoli. He saved me once a few months ago. I saw Viridian in action and it was so cool. Gay anime boy. I saw him too. Georgina in a dress. How do you know he didn't just buy his vigilante outfit from the same store? Costume store. Moldy broccoli. You did? Georgina in a dress. And I'm ignored. Cool. Gay anime boy. Yeah, I was kidnapped a while back and held with a bunch of other kids. We really thought we were gonna die, but Viridian came by and saved our asses before they could kill us or ship us off somewhere. The police came in just 10 minutes or so later. I think he tipped off the cops because they sure as hell didn't find us on our own. Either way, I owe Viridian my life, and I think my whole family is a Viridian supporter now. Ooh. Moldy broccoli. Yes, our cult is growing. Angry three-face. Georgina dress. Cult? Moldy broccoli. The cult of Viridian. Duh. Noisily card. Sigh. Noisily card has changed cat name to the cult of Viridian. Moldy broccoli. Yes! Thank you, Noi. Gay anime boy. I'm gonna log out. My brother's calling me for dinner. Bye.
Kenji scratched his head, blowing the black bangs out of his eyes irritably. Maybe he should spike up his hair. It probably looks cool. He sighed as he closed out of the chat. Kenji, dinner! His brother put his head into the bedroom. Come on, bro. Haven't you been glued to the computer for hours? Aren't you hungry? Sorry, I wanted to. Looking up stuff about that Viridian again? Urjo grinned easily. He's so manly. I know! Everyone's talking about him, and since there were only 6 photos and videos of him online, some people have been taking to drawing him based off descriptions of his rescues. Kenji bounced in his chair like the excitable 12-year-old he was. He's really getting popular, isn't he? Urjo tilted his head. Yeah, he's got a fan page now, too. There's several thousand numbers growing, and it's growing by the day. For a guy without a license and no calling cards, he's really getting a lot of attention. That's because he helps the people that really need it, Kenji smiled. He's even been seen patrolling Tokyo, Koto, Hosu, and Mufasu. I heard a rumor that he patrols the south side of Mufasu too. You mean the lawless area? Urjo winced. Man, he's got guts to patrol there. You should have seen him. Kenji became quiet as he remembered. They were going to kill this one kid. They were going to kill me for protecting that girl. But then Viridian appeared out of nowhere and saved me. He missed his brother's flinch at the accidental slip-up. He shook as he stared down the barrel of a gun. So this was how he was going to die. He was only 12. He didn't have a hardening cord like his brother. He couldn't stop the bullet that was aimed firmly between his eyes. Kenji heard the gun cock, and several of the other kids whimpered. He wouldn't be the first kid killed for stepping out of line. But he really hoped he'd be the last. He closed his eyes and he waited.
Bang!
Suddenly, he realized there was no pain. Was death really this painless? You okay, kid? He opened his eyes and saw a bright green mask staring at him from what looked like a ninja mask. The man held him firmly in his arms, and you saved me. Yep, the man grinned. Name's Viridian. Don't worry, the police are almost here. It's over, kid. You're going to be just fine. All of you are. Viridian gently set him down on the ground. You're safe. It's over. I'll protect you. For the first time in all his life, he felt like he understood why All Might said, I am here. When All Might rescued people, he'd use his catchphrase, and you just knew that it would be okay. Viridian's words, I'll protect you, sounded the same in his ears. It rung with a surety and truth that nearly left him quaking in relief. Because now he knew that nothing would hurt him. He'd be safe. He was safe. And suddenly, as he watched Viridian take down the criminals that had been their captors for the last 2 months, he'd realized something. All Might was a symbol, a ward against evil, a mantra that people checked it to make themselves feel safe. But Viridian was more than that. Somehow, he was more concrete, more real. Viridian was his hero. Kenji? Urjo's gentle voice shook him out of his flashback. Sorry, just remembering the rescue. Viridian was so cool. He smiled softly. No worries, bro. His brother came over and gently pulled him into a hug. I'm just glad you're safe and home. Thanks, Ichi. He gently smiled into his older brother's shoulder. Joe, Kenji, if you guys don't get your butts down here, I'm going to let your father eat all the dessert. Come on, best get down there before Dad eats everything. Joe grinned, showing off the sharp, shark-like teeth. I hope I meet Viridian again. And that was Chapter 3 of Viridian by SilvermistAnimeLover. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry that I haven't been posting. I've had some things going on. Sorry about the birds in the background, and sorry about my incorrect pronunciation of some words in this. I hope you enjoyed. Have a nice day. Bye.